Do I like sports? No. Will I read hundreds of pages about sports? Yes, as long as there's romance in there. It's officially April, which means it is time to do a little update on my book tracking blanket. If you're new here or you haven't seen any of my previous videos about this blanket, I am doing a book tracking blanket instead of a temperature blanket this year. So I have a different color yarn for each subgenre of a romance book, and for each one that I read within a month, I will crochet a few rows into this blanket. I had some new subgenres this month, so I have some new colors going. Here are all of the books I will be talking about in this video. So we have Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey, which is a sports romance. Then we have Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which was a paranormal romance. The Rulebook by Sarah Adams, which is also a sports romance. And I was finally able to finish House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, which is fantasy. So here is my little section for the month of March. This was for Fangirl Down, this was for Bride, this was for the Rulebook, and this was for House of Flame and Shadow. So keep watching if you want to see a little bit about my thoughts on each of those books and what I rated them while I crochet these rows into this blanket. As always, I will have the pattern for this blanket linked in the description down below. And if you have any question about any of the colors of yarns that I'm using, leave them in the comments and I will be sure to get back to you about it. It's officially March and I finished my first book of the month, which was Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey, which means it is time to add another row to my blanket. In February, I had a lot of different colors going. I read a dark romance, a YA, and a contemporary. And this month we are starting the month off with another new color. So this book is a sports romance about a pro golfer and his biggest fan. So we are going to be using this green color for sports romance today, which is Big Twist Hush in the color Olive. So I am going to attach this yarn and get started, and then I will talk to you about this book. I added on my new color, and this is how it's looking so far. Got a new color getting added to this, which is fun. So this book is 369 pages. And since this is a double crochet row and I'm using sort of a thicker yarn, I think I'm just going to do one row for this one. I'll do one row and then I'll see if I should add a second row, but I think I'm going to stop after one row. This book follows Wells Whitaker, who is a pro golfer, and he used to be one of the most up-and-coming rising stars in pro golf, but as of recently he's kind of been underperforming and he's more known for his grumpy attitude and the fights that he gets in instead of his golf performance. Despite that though, he has always had one consistent, which is his #1 fan, who is Josephine Doyle. She still shows up to every tournament and is on the sidelines cheering him on with signs, and she is the only person that still believes in him. Wells ends up making a scene at a tournament and ends up quitting halfway through, which ended up being the final straw for Josephine being his fan as well. Once she gives up on him as well, he realizes how big of a mistake he made, and he's suddenly desperate to be on Josephine's good graces again. Unbeknownst to Wells, Josephine is kind of going through some health struggles as well as some financial struggles with her family's pro shop after a hurricane hits and ruins the whole shop. Wells proposes the idea that he rejoin the tour with Josephine as his new caddy, and she reluctantly agrees because she really needs the money. They end up making a perfect team, and Wells starts winning again, and they start getting really close. They almost become inseparable, and then feelings start getting involved. So I actually really loved this book. I loved the whole aspect of it being like an athlete falling for their biggest fangirl, but I also didn't really know how Tessa Bailey would do that without the fangirl feeling like too starstruck by the athlete, or also the athlete feeling too, I don't know. But she ended up figuring out how to do that very well. And I really ended up loving the dynamic between Wells and Josephine. Their banter was really good. It was really funny at times. I thought it was nice to see the lead female kind of have this deep knowledge about the sport that is predominantly male oriented. I'm a sucker for the grumpy sunshine relationships all the time, so I really enjoyed theirs. I know a lot of people's issue with this book was that it felt very insta-love. Like, I think by chapter 10 they're already like in love with each other. But I kind of enjoyed that because you got to see the dynamic of them trying to balance their love life and also their work life, and how those two things overlapped and how that they kept them separate as well. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It would have been 5 stars. The half star off is purely because this book is in third person, and I just don't know what it is about third person. It feels very impersonal to me. So I would have liked it to be more in first person, but it didn't fully take away from the story for me. It was still enjoyable, and I definitely still flew through this book. You also get to meet Josephine's best friend Tallulah and Wells's acquaintance Burgess, who is a hockey player, and they are both the main characters of the second book in this series, which is The Au Pair Affair. I'm very excited for that. That comes out, I think, in June or July, sometime this summer. But I'm very excited for that because I ended up loving this book. This is my new favorite Tessa Bailey book. So I'm excited to see what she does with hockey, and that one is Tallulah becomes a live-in nanny for Burgess for his 11-year-old daughter, and I think that dynamic might be super fun. And they were fun characters in this one for the brief little interactions they had. So I can't wait for that book. But yes, this was a very good book. I recommend giving it a try. Even if you're not big on golf or anything like that, still very enjoyable. Still had me giggling and kicking my feet at all of their little interactions. And just all around a really good time with this book. So, if you want something that is a pretty quick read too, I read this in just a few days, and a super light book. There's not too much heaviness in this book, with enjoyable characters, especially if you enjoy the grumpy sunshine dynamic, then this might be the book for you, so give it a chance. I'm going to continue on with this row until I finish, and then I will come back and show you what it looks like. I just finished my row, so here's how this looks so far. And I will see you when I finish another book. It's now April, and I have some catching up to do on my book tracking blanket. So the last book that I left off on was Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey, which was a sports romance. That was the screen right here. I have 3 more books to add on to this for the month of March, and we've got some new genres, so that'll be fun. So after Fangirl Down, I finished Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and this was her first paranormal book. So here is my little key, and we will be using this yellow color today. It's a new color, haven't used that one before. This is Big Twist Value yarn in the color Mustard. So I ended off with green because we had sports romance, and then now we will be using this yellow. So Bride is a paranormal romance with our main characters Misery and Lo. Misery is a vampire and Lo is a werewolf. So Misery has never really fit in with the vampires, and she's more preferred to live with the humans, and she's kind of made a life for herself amongst the humans. However, her father is an important councilman, and he calls her back home to uphold an alliance between the vampires and the werewolves. So Misery and Lo are arranged to be married so that the vampires and the wares can have an alliance. There's a little bit of a mystery aspect there. You kind of find out why Misery agreed to the alliance, and she's trying to find somebody. This book was like a very light version of the Omegaverse. So if you've never read anything like that and you're wanting to kind of dip your toe in, this is a good place to start. And I thought it was definitely very interesting for Ali Hazelwood to choose that as the next book that she wanted to do. But I actually really enjoyed it. If you've ever read an Ali Hazelwood book, this definitely still has a lot of her trademark things. It has her quirky little one-liners, and it definitely felt like an Ali Hazelwood book while reading it, which is a good thing for me because I quite enjoy her books. And I thought it was kind of fun to see her branch out into a new genre. I do wish that we had gotten more of Lo's POV in this book. There was like little one-liners at the beginning of every chapter from his point of view, but I think I would have liked to see how he felt about everything while it was happening and get inside his head more. Because of that, and because of the fact that they were kind of like enemies at the beginning, I just didn't really feel like we got to know enough about Lo. He felt very like two-dimensional still at the end. There wasn't a lot to learn about him. I quite liked Misery. She still had that quirky sense of self that a lot of Ali Hazelwood's female characters do, but she almost had like a bit of a self-deprecating part too, which was pretty enjoyable. Here's how this looks so far with the yellow. I liked the little mystery aspect of this book. I didn't know that that was in there until I started reading it, so that was a nice surprise. And I quite liked the little universe that she set up, so she didn't go too deep into all of like the world building and stuff. So I think it would have been a little bit more enjoyable if she had gone deeper into the world building. But I think this book definitely ended in a way that she could expand this universe a little, and I think she might be planning to. I feel like I saw a video where she said she wants to. So I hope she does, because I enjoyed it, and I do think I would enjoy another book in this universe. I also think it would be nice to learn a little bit more about some of the side characters that we got introduced to in this book. So with all of that being said, I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I just think maybe it would have been 5 stars if there was a little bit of either some more world building or some more insight into Lo's point of view. But I like that Ali Hazelwood has branched out into different genres, and if she writes it, I'm gonna read it. So I enjoyed this little shift away from the STEM romances and just the contemporary romance in general. So if you're maybe looking for a really, really light fantasy that's almost not even fantasy at all, it's pretty much just takes place in a normal world with paranormal creatures, or you've heard about the Omegaverse and you want to maybe ease your way into that, then check out this book. Here's how this looks so far. This book was, I think, 400 pages, so I'm going to do 2 rows. I will go do my 2 rows and then check in when I'm done, and then we'll move on to the next book. I finished my 2 rows, and this is how it is looking. So I'll be back when I finish my next book. I finished another book, so I am going to add on to my book tracking blanket. The next book that I read is The Rule Book by Sarah Adams, and this is actually the sequel to The Cheat Sheet, which is also, of course, by Sarah Adams. The Cheat Sheet follows Nathan and Bree, and The Rule Book follows Derek and Nora. Derek is one of Nathan's teammates on his football team. So, of course, this is a sports romance, so I will be using the screen color again, which we used previously right here for Fangirl Down. I'm going to reattach my yarn, and then we will get talking about this book. I have my yarn reattached. Let's talk about this book. So this is technically a sequel or a companion novel to the cheat sheet. However, I have seen from a lot of people online that you technically can probably read this book without reading the cheat sheet. However, I read the cheat sheet a few years ago and I really liked it, so they're both really easy reads and very enjoyable. So if you have the time and you want to, I would say you should read the cheat sheet. So the rule book follows Derek and Nora. Derek is a tight end for the Los Angeles Sharks, which is a football team, and Nora has recently become a sports agent. So when Derek is in need of a new agent, Nora gets recommended to him by his teammates, Nathan's agent. However, Derek does not realize that his new agent is also his ex-girlfriend from college until he walks into a boardroom to meet her. Nora basically broke Derek's heart in college, so he is out to get a little bit of revenge. He agrees to sign her on as his agent in hopes that he can make her life as miserable as possible. Since this is her first full-time client, Nora is willing to do anything to make it seem successful. They agree to a rule book of a whole bunch of rules that they have to adhere by. But after a wild night in Vegas, they wake up married. So this book has second chance romance, it has accidental marriage, it has kind of a forced proximity. There's a lot of tropes in this one, but I kind of loved that about this. It sort of just felt like the quintessential romance novel. Nora's very quirky and has a lot of one-liners, but I actually kind of loved that about her. I thought she was a great character. She was very strong-willed and confident in her own abilities, and I loved Derek. Derek was such a great MMC. He was willing to help Nora out in any way that she needed, but he also knew when to stand back and let her kind of do her thing. He was so sweet, and to read about how their relationship ended in college and then what they had been doing in that time that they were apart, I really liked all of that. I thought it all felt very authentic and very like something that could actually happen in real life. And you even got a few little scenes with the characters from the cheat sheet, so Nathan and Bree, and that was super fun to kind of see those characters now. I loved all of the scenes with the football players. I thought they were so funny, and I just love how they all interacted with each other. I rated this book 5 stars. I just think Sarah Adams has somehow mastered how to write just feel-good romance books. Between this series and the When in Rome series, and I think she has another series that was previously independently published that got picked up by her publisher that is coming out later this year, so I'm excited to read those as well. She just knows how to write books that have you kind of kicking your feet and giggling and rooting for the main characters to get together more than anything. So if you read the cheat sheet or you're just looking for a fun little feel-good romance book, then check this book out. This book was 350 pages long, so I will be doing 2 rows for this one. So I'm going to go do those 2 rows and then I'll show you what it looks like after, but here's how it looks so far. And I'll be back when I'm done with my 2 rows. I finished my 2 rows for the rulebook, and here's how we are looking so far. So I'll be back when I finish my next book, which will be in about 10 seconds because I finished 2. Alright, the last book that I finished in March was one of my most anticipated books for the year, and I'm shocked it took me so long to get through it, but it was a big one. House of Flame and Shadow is the last book that I finished in the month of March. I thought I would finish this book in February. It came out January 30th, so I thought I would just read it all in February. It actually ended up taking me quite a while to get through this book, and not just because it was such a brick of a book, but I kind of struggled with this one. I'm not gonna lie, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So Obviously this is fantasy, so we're going back to our pinks. I'm gonna be using this blush pink color, which is right here. And this is a very big book, so let's see how many pages we're looking at. This book is 838 pages. So I will be doing, I believe, 4 rows for this one. So that's got quite a few rows to go here. I'm gonna reattach my yarn and then I will start talking about this book. Okay, so House of Flame and Shadow is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. If you have watched some of my other update videos on this blanket, then you'll know that I read Crescent City House of Earth and Blood and Crescent City House of Sky and Breath in January, leading up to the release of this book. This was a very highly anticipated book for me this year. If you have read the second one, House of Sky and Breath, then you know why. I can't really say much about what this book is about without giving away spoilers, so I'll just say the Crescent City series in general is more of a urban fantasy, meaning that it takes place in a fantasy world that is kind of like our world. They have cities, they have skyscrapers, they have phones, they wear leggings and bright pink tennis shoes, and it's very much like our world, but there is still the fantasy element to it. The first book had a big mystery element to it, which I really enjoyed. The second book was a little bit slower, still enjoyable, but it had a great ending. This book kind of is still dealing with a lot of the same problems that arose in the second book, and I hate to say it, but this book kind of fell flat for me. I'm not sure if it's because there was such a large gap between the second book and the third book. I think it was 2 years. So obviously fan theories were running wild, and I think that left a lot of room for people to come up with what they wanted to happen next in the story, and then when that stuff kind of didn't happen, you kind of felt a little bit of disappointment. I don't know. I think this book had potential to be a very great... I'm trying to do this without spoiling anything. I think this book had potential to be amazing, but I just don't think she did it right? I don't know. I don't want to say that because obviously it's her book and she has a vision, and I'm sure she left this in a place where future books in this series can still stand with. But there was a lot about this, even like her writing style just felt different and not necessarily in a great way. Like obviously this book is in 3rd person, which is different from the A Court of Thorns and Roses books. Those are in 1st person, except for she switched over to 3rd person in A Court of Silver Flames. These books have always been in 3rd person. However, in this one, she was jumping around in the point of view so often that it kind of gave you like whiplash. In one chapter, you'd get like the point of view of someone in this one area, and then it jumped to the point of view of this other person in a completely different area, and you're just jumping back and forth from plot to plot, and it just was kind of confusing and also kind of hard to grasp and hard to read. I actually had to switch over to audiobook halfway through this because I just wouldn't have finished it otherwise, which I hate to say because I love Sarah J. Maas's books. I also don't think I've ever fully resonated with Bryce, and in this one, she just kind of got on my nerves more than she didn't, I guess. She's always been like the strong, independent main character, which I liked. However, in this one, she just kind of was being like mean, like to all of her friends. She kind of just got mean. It also just kind of felt like things were happening a little bit too conveniently in this book. Like, they'd come across a problem, and then the next page would just have an info dump of all the information they needed to solve the problem. It was like they really didn't have to work for anything, which felt kind of confusing. There were quite a few info dumpy scenes where like one character would just have this pages of monologue just explaining whatever they needed to exactly know in that moment, which was also a little bit confusing because it was information that like probably should have been given in previous books. So that was just a little bit weird. Also, this book was like leading up to this great big war battle at the end of the book, which was all of like 2 pages maybe. Like, that felt very rushed. I think this book was separated into I think it was 3 parts. Might have been 4, but I think it was 3. I actually quite enjoyed part 1, but it still was kind of boring. But I liked the characters. Part 2 was really hard, and that is where I actually ended up putting down the book for like a month because there just wasn't really anything interesting happening, which sounds crazy for like a 900-page book that there would not be anything interesting happening on the page. And then in part 3, I think it did end up picking up again, but it was kind of a struggle to get through part 2. Some of the characters were quite annoying in this. Bryce, Therian, Ethan. I don't know why we got so much of Therian and Ethan's point of views. I mean, I'm assuming that the next books in this series are going to be about them, but they just were making dumb mistakes. Standout characters in this book for me were Lydia. I think Lydia carried this whole book on her back. And I kind of think that's it. It wasn't bad. It was a good book, but for it to be 900 pages, there were too many lulls and too many places where I just kind of was getting bored and wanted to put the book down, which is unusual for Sarah J. Maas's books for me. I feel like her books are the ones that generally keep my attention very in it, and I think I read like all of the A Court of Thorns and Roses books in like a week straight, just back to back to back. And Throne of Glass even, I think those ones also have a way of sucking you in, and I just don't know if the Crescent City books have that same feel, which I hate to say because I genuinely loved the first Crescent City book. I thought it was super fun. I thought it was like a new take on fantasy, especially for Sarah J. Maas, and from there it's kind of just gone downhill. However, I am still very excited for the next ACOTAR book, and I'm sure I will still be reading any future Crescent City books, but this one was a 3-star read for me, which pains me to do, but hopefully future books from her will be back to the normal Sarah J. Maas. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. If you read this book, I'm interested to hear what you thought. Leave it in the comments below if you have any different opinions. This is all just my opinion. I still really liked it. It was still a really good book. I still love all of her books. She still is a great writer. I think this one just falls at the bottom of the list from all of her books for me, personally, which sucks because it was a really anticipated book. I just finished this first row, and then I will do my other 3 rows, and I'll show you when I'm done with those. And then that will be it for the month of March. I just finished all of my rows for House of Flame and Shadow, and here's how it is looking so far. And that is all of my books for the month of March. So to recap, this month I read 4 books. This first green line right here was for Fangirl Down by Tessa Bailey. This gold color was for Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This second green color was for The Rulebook by Sarah Adams, and then this pink was for House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. As always, leave your book recommendations in the comments down below so that I have some recommendations to go on for next month. I still have a few genres that I haven't gotten to yet, so hopefully I can start getting some more subgenres going in there. Like this video and subscribe so you're notified when my update video goes up next month for my April wrap-up, which will probably come early May. And make sure you are following along on my Instagram for more often updates on this blanket. It is linked in the description down below, along with the rest of my social medias. And thank you for watching. I will see you in May.